Good morning, everyone, and we want to welcome you to the final day of the Speaks Volumes Conference and this session, At the Pole Position, Your Course for Student Success. This session is presented by Christine Volker. Christine is the K-12 Program Director for the Quality Matters program. She's been involved with K-12 education for nearly 20 years, with an emphasis on online learning, library media, instructional technology, and professional development. Prior to coming to Quality Matters, Christine developed and coordinated the first student online learning program for her district. She holds an advanced certificate in administration and supervision, a master's in library and information sciences, and a BA in both history and social sciences interdisciplinary early childhood education. We're very happy to have Christine with us today, so without further ado, Christine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Rich, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to At the Pole Position, your online or blended course for student success. I'm going to change the slide here. First of all, I hope that you're all having a really great time here at the Speaks Volume Conference, and this is actually my first time at this conference, and I hope it will not be my last. A lot of great learning and networking has been happening. Like Rich said, my name is Christine Volker, and I'm the K-12 Program Director for the Quality Matters program. We're a nonprofit specializing in helping teachers and school systems with online and blended course design. You can contact me at any time at the things that are up on the screen there. So there's my email address and my Twitter handle. I'm actually coming at you from Maryland this morning, and more specifically, from the future, as we're an hour ahead of you here. And I promise I won't give away what happens at 9:41 this morning. But thank you all for choosing to attend this session. And maybe now that you're teaching online or you're developing online courses, maybe that you're flipping your class or taking your classes into a blended format. And this may or may not have been your decision, but I'm guessing that you've all been pretty adventurous and at the forefront in incorporating new technologies and strategies as they advance into your lessons. Okay, so just for kicks, I do have a poll up there on the screen, and I'm going to use the polling feature here in Collaborate, and I'd like you to choose the option that best describes you. So there's 4 different options up there on the screen. So you'll see A, I currently teach an online course that I designed myself, or B, I currently teach an online class that someone else designed, or C, I currently teach in a blended environment, or D, I'm going to be teaching a class in an online and or a blended format in the near future. So you'll see right under the participants bar there is that polling feature, so you can go ahead and do that. And I see that we already have some answers there. And that might be everyone. So it looks like 2 of you have teach an online course that you designed yourself. It's really great and ambitious, I must add. And 1 of you teaches in a blended environment. So great. Okay. All right. So I wanted to start off by saying that racetracks like this one, the Indy 500, weren't always like this. They were once like this. And I want you to take a moment and really look at this picture. It's a picture from the Indianapolis 500 when it was first in its infancy, and I'll give you a moment to really take it in and think about what you notice about this picture. Okay, so does anything really jump out at you about this old-time picture of the Indianapolis 500? You can type it in the chat, or you can grab the mic. I think we could have 2 people with the mic at a time. Yeah, that's a good one, Rich. Only 1 car. In an open air vehicle, yeah, we don't see that anymore. Right, not much protection for the driver and the audience. What jumped out at me is that there really are no guides. There's no lines on the road. And so we can look at this kind of like comparing it to the state of online and blended learning, because it's in its infancy too. So I'm here today, in the grand scheme of things, it's in its infancy. So I'm here today to talk about why we need those lines or those rough guidelines when we're designing quality online and blended courses. So recently I've come in contact with more and more teachers who are tasked with developing their own online or blended courses, kind of like you guys who answered that in the poll, or courses that are used for other people within their school districts. And I think this picture is a good representation of what it's like for these people. You know, they say, yahoo, I'm off and running, but when they actually look at that empty LMS shell, they're pretty overwhelmed. So when you're used to preparing your lesson plans every week according to a curriculum, it can be intimidating to think about developing the full duration of a course from start to finish. So, but it can be done, and there are supports out there for you. So today I'm going to provide you with some information that will make the race for you a little bit smoother and build in the supports that will make your students more successful. Okay, so I'm going to take you on a different type of raceway today, and one that was carefully built on best practices and research. And as we travel the course, we'll be stopping to get some tune-ups at some pit stops, 8 of them exactly, and they're up there on your screen. I do have a handout, and I will be pushing that out toward the end. These you'll recognize, these pit stops. You'll recognize them as being relevant in any course, whether it be face-to-face, online, or blended. And if we don't stop at these pit stops to tune up our course in any of the formats that I just mentioned, we can quickly spin out. I once watched a TED Talk given by Peter van Manen in April of 2013 in the Netherlands. The talk was about the technologies used in Formula One race cars and how it could be applied to medicine. It was fascinating stuff. Well, Peter in his talk, he started off by saying that motor racing is a funny business. He said that they make a new car every year, and then they spend the rest of the season trying to understand what they built to make it better, to make it faster. And then the next year they start all over again. The opening of Peter's talk really struck with me because in my job, I'm always trying to find analogies for online learning, and more specifically, online course design. So in many ways, what Peter said, what he says about building these race cars, it applies to building online courses. And I've seen it all too many times. A district gets the directive that we need some online courses, but we need them for next year. So in the interest of time and a whole lot of other issues, we build those courses and we need to go back and analyze them. We need to look at what worked, what didn't work, what could be tuned up. How can we make our courses better, faster, as they say in racing, right? I absolutely love TED Talks, and someday maybe I'll be asked to do a TED Talk, but for now I'm settling for Speaks Volumes. So in my Speaks Volumes talk, I thought I would piggyback, or I guess you would call it drafting in NASCAR speak. I learned a lot about NASCAR when I was putting this presentation together. But I'll draft on Peter's ideas a little bit, only relating them to online learning. So, oh, I got to switch my slide. So according to Peter, and this is what he says, Formula One race cars get tuned up every 2 weeks with about 5,000 new components to fit on the car. So about 5 to 10% of the race car, that means, will be different every 2 weeks. So how do they do that? Well, Peter in his talk, he said that there are a lot of sensors on the car to measure different things. I wish I could, you guys should go and look at the TED Talk. It's pretty interesting. So there's all these sensors on the car. They measure different things. The car on the stage in the picture has about 120 sensors on it when it goes into a race. And those sensors measure all sorts of things around the car. That data is then logged from different parameters so they can see things that are not working as they should. Why couldn't we see it? Was this a predictable event if something disastrous happened? They look at patterns in the data to see where they would be able to do things better. I know you guys do this in your schools, data-driven decision-making, right? So, but we don't have sensors hooked up to our online courses. I don't think it's that easy to make those predictions in online learning because it's very much still like this. The one thing that really struck me in this picture was, like I said, that there are no lines on the track. And I can't imagine how they did this without any guiding lines. If we equate this to online learning, right now, I think many of us are struggling with finding and interpreting the guidelines. We can, though, give our courses periodic tune-ups that will lead to continuous improvement. But this, I think, is sometimes easier said than done. We need to have those guiding lines or colored flags to follow. Okay, so today I'm going to take you on the QMK12 Raceway, where we'll race through the design elements that when we incorporate them into your online or blended course, they'll help you with student success. We're going to stop at the 8 pit stops to get tuned up, and we'll explore the concept of alignment, which you can see there on the Raceway as well. So, rev up your engines. We're about to get started. I'm cracking myself up here. Okay, so pit stop number 1 is the course overview in the introduction. So at this pit stop, we're going to take a look at ensuring that the overall design of the course is made clear to the students at the beginning of the course. So the course introduction is important because it sets the tone for the course. It lets students know what to expect, and it provides guidance to ensure that they get off to a good start. So at this pit stop, our checks include things like making sure that the instructions about getting started and where to find various course components are clear. So you may do this with things like a course tour or a start here area or a getting started folder or maybe even a scavenger hunt, right? In blended courses, this is just as equally important. So you should make sure that both the face-to-face and online components of the course are there. All of these things that I'm talking about will be in that handout, so you'll be able to take that with you. We also, at this checkpoint, should make sure that we check to make sure that you introduce the purpose and the structure of the course with things like information on sequencing of the activities and maybe even a course calendar, testing procedures, how assignments should be submitted, things like that. So everything's told to the students up front. In a blended course, this is where it helps to show the components of the course that will complement each other. So at this checkpoint, we can make sure that you also have etiquette expectations in the course with communications guidelines and your academic integrity standards. At this pit stop, we should probably make sure that the technical skills that students need to be successful in the course are available. So we'll look to make sure that you have your self-introduction too. This initial introduction, that self-introduction, that introduction of the students to the course creates that sense of connection between the instructor and the students. So the pit crew here will not only look at that, but they'll also look at any prerequisites that are required or competencies that are needed. So what are those things that the students need to have mastered before they can take this course? All right, so we're heading towards pit stop 2. And There's Pit Stop 2. Pit Stop 2 is your chance to really make sure that your learning objectives are well-oiled. And at the course level, they should include, they should describe outcomes that are measurable. And let me see, get that there. Okay, there we go. So they should describe outcomes that are measurable, as you can see up there on the screen. They should describe what students will learn and be able to do as a result of instruction. So whatever you're doing in the course, they should be pointed towards those learning objectives. So why are they even doing it? Sometimes these are referred to, as you know, as learning outcomes or targets, depends on your district, right? So in some courses, you may have learning objectives that are mandated by your school system or your state, and you won't have the authority to change them. Your module or unit level objectives will be inspected too, so we'll make sure that they're measurable and consistent with the course level learning objectives. We can't really forget about your content standards to see that whether they're appropriately designed for the level of the course and that they're stated clearly and written from the student's perspective. So really, those learning objectives are kind of like the foundation for your course. So that's really what everything else is built on. Sometimes those are given to you, right? We can't change them. Sometimes those are learning objectives that you can create yourselves. The last thing in this pit stop, we'll check its instructions to students. So do you have instructions to students on how to meet those learning objectives? And are those instructions complete and stated clearly? And a lot of times if we go back and look at those learning objectives and make sure that they're measurable and specific, it can help us diagnose a lot of problems within the course. All right. So back in the race, and we're headed towards pit stop number 3, assessment and measurement. At this pit stop, we're going to look to make sure that your assessment strategies are designed to evaluate student progress by reference to the stated learning objectives. There's those learning objectives, those foundations of the course. So to measure the effectiveness of student learning, are they integral to the learning process? So while you're at pit stop 3, we should look to see that the assessments selected measure those stated learning objectives, because remember, those are your foundation. Let's make sure that the items you use to assess student learning can be successfully completed if the students have met the objectives which are embedded in the course materials and learning activities. So assessment strategies and student expectations for completing the course, are they clearly defined, and does the student understand what he or she needs to know and be able to do? Are you telling your students how the grades are going to be calculated and what the consequences are for not completing the assignments in a timely manner? The PIT crew here will check, will help you to ensure that you provide specific descriptive criteria for those assessment strategies on how you're evaluating the student work, and that having those assessment strategies, that not only helps the students, but it will assist you in determining student achievement. So when you're at pit stop 3, you should also make sure that you include assessments and tools which allow the student reflect upon his or her progress towards mastering the learning objectives and the course requirements. And as long as you're still here, we should also look to make sure that your assessments are varied in order to accommodate multiple learning styles and provide different pathways for students to demonstrate mastery. Back on the racetrack, and we're heading towards pit stop number 4. And I think I'm doing pretty good on time here too. All right, so pit stop number 4, it focuses on shoring up your instructional materials, which form the core of the course. The focus here is on making sure that they are supporting those course objectives and competencies. So let's look a little bit more at pit stop 4. All right. So the materials you choose to include in your course should contribute to the achievement of the stated learning objectives, the course level learning objectives and the module or unit level learning objectives. They should all align in a clear and direct way. So their relationship with the activities in the course should be always clearly explained to the students. So what's the purpose for including them in your course? The PIT crew will also help to make sure that instructional materials are appropriate to the reading level of the students who are in the course. Do you have a wide range for those different levels of reading levels of students? Are the materials robust, and do they help you create a rich learning environment? Do they reflect current, up-to-date thinking and practice in the subject area? When we're here, we should probably also make sure to check out whether or not your instructional materials prepare students to meet state standards. Are they sufficient to prepare students to succeed in any testing that you guys have in your subject areas? So it's important to make sure that the materials you include are also culturally diverse and bias-free. I'm trying to make sure I hit everything on the screen there. And lastly, that PIT crew will help you to ensure that they're appropriately cited. All right. So speeding now towards pit stop number 5, which is learner interaction and engagement. So at pit stop number 5, here we're going to look at that learner interaction and engagement. We all know that engaging students to become active learners contributes to the learning process and to student persistence. So let's make sure that the forms of interaction incorporated into your course motivate students and promote learning. So in pit stop number 5, we're going to look for a number of different things. So we'll look to make sure that the learning activities promote the achievement of the stated learning objectives, right? There's those learning objectives again, the foundation. Are your students actively engaging in activities that'll help them to accomplish your learning objectives? Are they varied in order to provide reinforcement and mastery in multiple ways? So there's those different opportunities. Do they accommodate multiple learning styles? And we can also add here in blended courses, the activities that take place in the face-to-face and online environments should be connected by a common thread or a theme, but more importantly, they should complement one another. So they're mutually reinforcing. Do your learning activities then also provide opportunities for interactions which support active learning? The PIT crew here is going to look to ensure that your activities include student-to-instructor interaction. So here's all those different types, right? Do we have that interaction with the instructor? Do we have that interaction with the student to the content? And then with the student to the interface of the course? And also the students to other students in the course. It's also important here to make sure that clear standards for instructor responsiveness and availability are communicated to the student. We don't want to say that we're available to the students 24/7, so you might have some guidelines for that. The requirements for the types of interactions that I mentioned here should also be clearly articulated by you. So maybe you have a set of discussion and participation guidelines indicating the quality and the quantity of student interaction. Okay, so we're going to go now towards pit stop number 6. And at this pit stop, they have their tools ready to go. So here we have pit stop number 6. And at pit stop number 6, we can take a look at the technology, which helps those various course components to work, and whether or not it facilitates students' learning experience. Okay. So pit stop number 6. So Here we're going to look at whether or not it facilitates the student's learning experience, and is it easy to use rather than impeding that student's progress. The course navigation features and the technology used in the course, do those foster student engagement and ensure access to those materials and resources that they're using in order to learn? First and foremost, the important thing to check here is that the course tools and media support those learning objectives, and that they're appropriately chosen. And when I say tools, I mean the functional software that provides areas for that interaction in the course. So they may or may not be included in your LMS. They may be external to that LMS. So example of these are discussion boards, chat rooms, grade books, gaming areas, whiteboards, wikis, blogs, those types of things. So media, when I talk about media here, that refers to one-way delivery modalities that enhance learning. So examples of those would be like video, audio, simulations. So are there tools and media that support engagement and active learning in your course? So for example, do you include automated self-checks or animations? Do you use the tracking feature in your LMS for read and unread posts, or Google Docs, those types of collaboration tools? This pit stop checks that the navigation throughout the online components of your course are logical, that they're consistent, efficient, and also intuitive, right? And that students have ready access to those technologies. Do your students know what plugins might be required and how to go about installing them? Do you give them a list of peripheral items like headsets and microphones that they might need in your course? And that might also all be, you know, determined by your district when you go ahead and teach an online course. If your students are accessing library databases, do they have the correct usernames and passwords needed for that access? And then this pit stop will check to make sure that your course takes advantage of current technologies with the understanding that you might be limited by firewalls your school might have in place. So always remember that we don't just use technology for technology's sake, or choosing those available which best meet the needs of the course. And then lastly, at the stop, it's important to make sure that those technologies and tools protect your students' confidentiality. So wherever possible, you should use educational versions of these tools. All right, we're heading towards pit stop number 7. So pit stop number 7 helps with support for the learner. 4 different kinds of support services are addressed here. And those include technical support, accessibility support, academic student support, and student services support. So your course needs to facilitate access to these services that are always essential to student success. So let's take a look. So pit stop 7 examines that your students can access these things within your course. And not only certain types of students, but all students, right? So so we look to see that the course has directions for students with exceptionalities and their families, so that they can find relevant information and services, and that your class complies with the school's accessibility policies and procedures. So types of exceptionalities we can include are intellectual and developmental differences. We can include gifted and talented students here, students with sensory disabilities, and that also includes blind and deaf students, communication disorders, which includes students with speech and language difficulties and autism, physical and health difficulties, and behavioral issues. So you might link to the school, state, or federal special education policies, guidelines, and laws, and you might also include a policy statement which tells students and parents and other stakeholders about access to the schools or district support services with links. And a lot of times that's already set up for you by your school system. So this is also where we can tune up the description you have about technical support that's available to the students. And we can look to see that the students have clear directions of how they can access it when they need it. And while you're here, you should also check to make sure that you've included the types of academic and student support services that are available to your students and how they can access them. So things like tutoring services, library resources, online orientations provided by your district, maybe advising and counseling services that are available, and tutorials can also be included here. So maybe your school system has a writing center or tutorials on using citation tools like Noodle Tools. So students should know not only what's available, but how to access those things as well. Back on the track. And we're cruising toward the finish line here, but there's one last pit stop that we need to make. And that's pit stop number 8, which has us looking at the accessibility of your course. So this is always a sticky widget for people. Does your course demonstrate a commitment to accessibility for all students? Does it incorporate the principles of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? So that's what we're going to take a look at in pit stop number 8. So usually courses need to spend a lot of time in this pit stop, and that's frustrating because at this point we just want to get to the finish line. But it's so important that we spend the time to tune it up right here. We need to make sure that a course provides the accessibility information along with the guidance necessary for obtaining those student accommodations. An easy way to do this is to make sure that your LMS is accessible. But on top of that, you should also be certain that you have all that documentation certifying that your course is accessibility, the accessibility of the content, the tools, the software that you use. You should stop and check that all the outside pages and materials in the course that you use in the course, that you provide equivalent alternatives to the auditory and visual content. And as I'm talking so fast here, I'm remembering that Jean, who is in the session right now, is doing the closed captioning for this. So probably should be talking a little bit slower. Let's see, what else here? So you should have titles and descriptions which provide text-based representations of graphics, so that someone who's using a screen reader will be able to go over that graphic and it will be able to read to it exactly what it is. Videos and live audio should have really ideally synchronized captions and transcripts. And you can check that your course ensures screen readability and minimizes distractions. Lastly, here we can check to make sure that your course can accommodate the use of assistive technologies. So I see it, the checkered flag. But before we get to it, there's one more important topic to visit, and a good racing driver relies on cues. So they know when to apply the brakes, when to turn into a corner, and a good online course designer or online instructor relies on alignment. And I'm going to go back to this slide here because this goes to I actually drew this. Yay me. So this goes back to it reminds me of when, you have little kids and you're building a racetrack and all the pieces have to snap into place. On the QM racetrack, we call that alignment. So I could also use the analogy of a racetrack here, of a race car here, and you have your chassis and all the other components that need to be affixed right, or else there could be a crash. The engine system, the fuel system, the braking system, suspension, transmission, they all need to be designed and constructed soundly. Now, when I drive my car, I have no idea about any of that, but I know that someone somewhere really constructed them all soundly. It's all the back-end pieces, all those things that were in place before I ever really got into my car. And like your students getting into their class, you know, all those pieces have to be aligned in place, and they don't even know about it, so it's seamless. So that's what I mean in terms of the components that, you know, I talked about earlier. And when I was at that second pit stop, we talked about making sure that our learning objectives are measurable and clear. So your learning objectives are the foundation, and they need to be strong because the rest of your course is built on them. The standards that you see on your screen all work together like a well-oiled machine. So they're all intertwined, and if one part doesn't function the way it's supposed to, well, let's just say we're headed for a crash. And we're trying to prevent this from happening. So when we look at this again, we need to make sure that all those components work with one another. They complement each other. They're all working seamlessly together. Past the crash, because we're not going to get to a crash. So I wanted to tell you that if you're feeling like you're quickly getting lapped and perhaps even headed toward a crash, you're not alone. I want you to know that there is a pit crew available at the Quality Matters where I work, who can help. And that TED Talk I referred to earlier goes on to talk about the technology that they collect from that data in the Formula One racing cars and how they can apply this same technology to infants who are in intensive care battling illnesses. So it's a pretty interesting talk. I'll get more to that in a little bit, but he says that they're thinking big because it's the right thing to do. So this is my shameless plug, a spark plug, if you will, right? So Quality Matters, we're a nonprofit, and our focus is on helping schools with course design. And like Peter's program, we're thinking big because it's the right thing to do. We have a rubric that you can use to design and update your online and blended courses. And the rubric includes specific standards for each of the pit stops that we hit today. But not only does it include those specific standards, it includes help in order to get there. So it also has detailed annotations for how to meet each of those standards. So people who subscribe to our program can participate in their own informal peer course reviews using our online tools, or they can have their own courses that they've developed officially reviewed by the Quality Matters program. We have another online tool which allows you to conduct collaborative reviews using different standards. And people use that not just for reviewing courses. So maybe you want to do reviews of learning objects or conduct walkthroughs of other online teachers. That tool can be used for that. So in addition to those two components that I talked about, and you'll see the three components on your screen there, we do offer professional development for using the rubric, for designing online and blended courses, and conducting course reviews. And we're rolling out the new tool that will let you do your own reviews using rubrics that you design. You can take pieces of the Quality Matters rubric and pieces of your own rubric. You can take other standards like INACOL standards and put them in there and do your own reviews that way as well. So wherever Quality Matters, you can decide how to measure it. So check us out. Making sure that students succeed in online and blended courses certainly is our passion. And we really feel that quality course design and great online instruction are the challenge to achievement. But I am going to go quickly through everything again. I'm going to do the race summary. So we went to pit stop 1, which was about the course introduction, setting the tone for the course and letting students know what to expect, and provides guidance to ensure that they get off to a good start. Then we went to pit stop number 2 with those learning objectives, that foundational piece. So looking at that and how the alignment to all the other pieces really, piggybacks off of standard 2 there, and maybe, what do they call that, rubbing rubber? Standard number 3, we talked about assessment, and that it's implemented in a manner that not only allows for the instructor to have a broad perspective on the student's mastery of the content, but also allows the students to measure their own learning. And 4, that the instructional materials are authoritative, appropriately chosen, and up to date. Pit Stop 5, we talked about those forms of interaction that you use within your course, and that they motivate students and promote learning. And 6, the technology enabling the various course components facilitates the student's learning experience, and that the students can use it. It doesn't impede their progress. And then we went to 7. The course facilitates student access to instructional services, which are essential to student success, and of course, that all-important accessibility standard, and that we demonstrate that we do have a commitment that all students can succeed and that all students can have access to that course. So I'm going to go back to Peter again. And I guess Peter, mostly what he was saying about in his TED Talk and about what they did with these Formula One racing cars, is that he was talking about how they could leverage the power of using those same technologies that they use to diagnose problems and to continuously improve the effectiveness of those Formula One race cars. They decided that they would use those to diagnose problems in infants, and subsequently to get them those health experts and help that they need in order to thrive. And I think that's pretty impressive. But I really also think that we can diagnose and improve our online and blended courses if we stay on course and follow certain non-prescriptive guidelines. And in doing so, our students will thrive. Oh my gosh, and look at the time here. Almost like I planned it like that. But I'm going to hand out cupcakes to you now. You can, quote unquote, eat them while I take the time to answer any questions that you might have, that you might have placed in the chat, or that you have now. And I love it. I had to put food in here because actually I saw this picture and it was so cute. But I love when food is given out at staff development sessions. So here are your virtual cupcakes. They look delicious to me. Incidentally, you should enjoy them with some milk because by hitting all those pit stops, you will win the race. And if you didn't know, the winner of the race always gets a bottle of milk. So with that being said, I'd like to open it up if you guys have any questions.
Thank you so much, Christine. And as she just said, the floor is open. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the text chat area, or you're welcome to grab a mic and offer them audibly. So I'll give everyone a moment.
Oh, you know what? I should push out that PDF now. So I'll go ahead and push out the handout.
All right, we should be receiving the handout momentarily. There it is. So if you'd like to save this to your computer, you're certainly welcome to. All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, we have reached the end of the time for the session. We want to respect everyone's time in preparation for moving on to 10 o'clock sessions, if you are attending any of those. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share, Christine?
Nope, just that I'd like to thank everybody for coming this morning, and I hope you'll be in touch.
Oh, there is one question here. Do you put graphics in your courses?
I guess, so who's that, Ramona? So I guess, are you saying should you put graphics in your online courses, or do I personally put them in our PD courses for Quality Matters? I'm assuming it's the latter. You know what? Graphics are tricky because of that whole accessibility issue, right? So I think graphics are really important, though, because a lot of our students are really visual. I know I'm a very visual person. You probably could see by my slides. But as long as we provide some sort of alternative content that is, equally the same, so that our students who can't see those graphics are able to get those same concepts and ideas, I think that it's really important to keep those graphics in there. And a lot of times when you do put in a graphic in an LMS, it'll ask you for the alternative text. And so when you mouse over it, you'll be able to read that text. And then also a screen reader will get that in the text. When they use that screen reader, it'll read that alternative text. And also, yeah, captions for sure.
All right, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today, Christine. I have a couple closing comments here that I want to remind everyone about. Recordings of the sessions are generally available the next day. So if you'd like to review the information that Christine has shared, it should be available online, certainly within 24 hours. Now, through the next Speaks Volumes Conference in July of 2015, you are welcome to review any of the recorded sessions, and you may earn CPE credit for those. You just need to make sure you visit the CPE record of attendance, and that's available through the Speaks Volumes site. That way you can note that you have viewed a recording, and that way you can be credited the CPE. Now, for those of you here with us live, you don't have to worry about that. The CPE Certificate of Participation is automatically available for you because of your presence here in today's session. So once again, I just want to say my thanks to Christine Volker for her presentation today. Great information and things that we should all be aware of, whether we're doing strictly online courses or even blended courses, as that is growing in popularity, and that's in a way my focus. So this has all been very good reminders for all of us. So thank you so much, Christine. Thank you all. I hope you have a very good day for the remainder of the Speaks Volumes Conference. Thank you all very much.